Wagwan. Good morning, good night, welcome back, and if you're listening for the first time, welcome to episode 4 of The Real Situation, where we give you a taste of Jamaican politics. I'm your host, Melanie Byfield, and the journey continues. Where are we going again? You know, sometimes you drive and you've got to remind yourself what the trip was for. Okay, 1655, stolen from Africa, brought to Jamaica and enslaved by the British. Slavery ended in 1838 and the struggle for freedom, justice and equality continued in a Jamaica colonized by the British through to independence in 1962. So yes, now, 62 years later, independent Jamaica is on the road to transitioning from a constitutional monarchy to a constitutional republic. Why? Got a journey not done. The highest representative of Jamaica is an English king. The 1962 Constitution, which granted Jamaica independence and which represents the highest law of the land, is a colonial document. And Jamaica's highest court of appeal is the Privy Council in London. In 2021, Barbados actually became the 4th former colony in the British West Indies to remove the British monarchy as head of state. Dominica, Guyana, and Trinidad and Tobago did it already. Now we have Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, Grenada, St. Kitts, St. Vincent, and the Bahamas, Wagwan. So on a real, time come. This is the first of 3 phases to decolonize Jamaica. Phase 1, that's the reform process, is focusing on the repatriation of the Constitution, the abolition of the monarchy, establishment of a republic, and all other matters that are deeply entrenched provisions of the Constitution that will require a referendum. Phase 2 looks at the wording and provisions of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms and the ordinarily entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which amendments are desired and required. And then phase 3 focuses on the full assessment of the country's legal and constitutional infrastructure. So right now, we're in phase 1, focusing on fully entrenched provisions of the Constitution. So what are those? 3 things. Number 1, to amend the Constitution to remove the monarchy, which is King Charles III as head of state, and replace him with a Jamaican head of state. The CRC has actually proposed a president for that role. There's a very strong argument and a real firm roadblock that's been established, actually saying that removing the monarchy should also accompany the removal of the Privy Council as Jamaica's final court of appeal, since this would then lead to full decolonization. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. So that was number 1, right? Number 2, amend the colonial instrument known as the Second Schedule of the Jamaica, in parentheses, Constitution Order in Council 1962. Under the West Indies Act 1962, and Jamaicanize it backside, right, into a constitution by the people, for the people, and it would become the Constitution of Jamaica. And number 3 is to hold a referendum, right, where the people of Jamaica either say yes or no to these amendments, and it's required because they're deeply entrenched. So, a 15-member Constitutional Reform Committee submitted a report in May of this year, and it's been tabled in Parliament as a ministry paper. And there's roadblocks. The report wasn't signed by the members of the committee who are part of the opposition. Mark Golding, leader of the opposition, actually prepared a document which specifies the issues that the party is not in agreement with. And the big one where bust up the tire, right, is the final court of appeal. And there's other big issues still that are being debated in the public. And, we'll address those. But what we're going to do right now is actually analyse the report itself a little closer. And we're going to focus on a couple of topics, the introduction and the operations. So the report actually introduces us to the 15-member committee that was officially established on March 1 and introduced to the public on March 22 of 2023. On the ministry's website, and when I say the ministry, I mean the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, there's a news report that's dated May 16, and it has a title, Constitutional Reform Committee Committed to Transparency, Minutes Available. And what this is referring to is the fact that their minutes are available. Yes, they are on their website, and I've put the link to where those minutes are on the front of the podcast page. There were 38 minutes. There are 36 that are available, and they date from May 22 through till May 22, 2023, through April 24 of 2024. So who are the committee members? Well, the first thing to point out is there's no Diaspora representation. And just to clarify what a diaspora is, it's technically, well, it comes from the Greek word, right, to scatter about, and that's what diaspora do. They scatter, from their homeland to places over the world, but they maintain ties of some kind with their specific country of origin. And notice, it no mean runway. It no mean you're not Jamaican again. It no mean foreigner. It no mean only send me your money. It no mean us versus them. And it no mean enemy. Here's what it means. And Ambassador Curtis Ward put it very eloquently, right? And I quote, "We are bound by being Jamaicans by birth or descent. Being Jamaicans by birth or descent makes us no less Jamaican. And whether living in Jamaica or abroad, we are all Jamaicans." So where's the diaspora mainly? The US, the UK, and Canada. It's estimated there's probably about 4 generations of Jamaica in Birmingham, which it's estimated about 3.5% of the people in Birmingham are of Jamaican descent, and about 4% of Londoners are of Jamaican descent. Where else you'll find Yardman? Cayman, Panama, Cuba, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, and trust me, anywhere else you go in the world, there's a Jamaican somewhere. All right, why? Yeah, that's a great question, but predominantly most people work on more money, right? And what's the population of the diaspora? How many of us are there? It's estimated somewhere between 1.7 million and 2.2 million, right? Bearing in mind that the population of Jamaica itself is 2.8 million. And 20% of Jamaica's GDP comes from the diaspora. So, the CRC is composed of 15 members, and there is no diaspora representation. Now, the Montego Bay Town Hall meeting right? Dr. Karen Dunkley, who is the former Jamaica Diaspora Northeast USA representative, she took part in that meeting. She was in a Zoom call, and during a conversation, blah, blah, she was told that a Diaspora subcommittee, there'd be consideration given for the formation of that, right? But that didn't happen. In the CRC report, it actually lists 4 subcommittees. 1, public engagement and communication. 2, youth strategic engagement. 3, state affairs, that reviews powers of monarch and governor general, because I didn't know what that was. And 4, a drafting strategy subcommittee. There are no diaspora subcommittees. And staying on the topic of the diaspora, I actually came across a really engaging forum. The moderator was Ambassador Curtis Ward. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Ambassador Curtis Ward. Right, he is Jamaica's former ambassador to the United Nations. He's a leading voice in diaspora affairs. He was born in St. Elizabeth. He's the first high-level appointee from the diaspora to serve in Jamaica's foreign and diplomatic service. First, he served in the Jamaican embassy in Washington, D.C., and then at the United Nations as ambassador and deputy permanent representative with responsibility for Security Council affairs. He later went on to become an adjunct lecturer at George Washington University, and also as an adjunct professor in the Homeland Security graduate program at the University of the District of Columbia. I want bad resume that. So, this forum that Ambassador Ward was the moderator of was called What the Diaspora Are Saying. It's available on YouTube. I'm going to post the link. And it was broadcast on Carib Nation, and it took place April 30th, 2023. And apparently a report of the program was shared with the CRC. So the panel on this forum was made up of UK, US and Canadian professionals. And they discussed matters such as the exclusion of the diaspora from the CRC. And they referenced it as something that wasn't a blind omission and that was peculiar, because there's a global diaspora council which gives you the impression that the voice of the diaspora is considered essential. They also discussed things such as politicians being elected, term limits for politicians, cabinet ministers who are selected having proven and skills that are related to where they are appointed to. And also reiterating the fact that this process is about the Jamaican people, right? Regardless of where you live. And there should be extensive consultation, because at the end of the day, it's Jamaican people who are going to be the beneficiaries of this amended constitution, right? Now, me I go lick you with Ambassador Ward's closing comments. Here I'm saying, and I quote, "From my observations over the years, there is no question in my mind that diaspora members are more apt to demand transparency in government and accountability by those in charge of the governance of the country, and are more likely to advocate for the interests of the people above partisanship and political self-interest. In my observation, a vast number of Jamaicans at home often acquiesce. Perhaps that is one of the reasons why members of the diaspora are excluded from participating in governance." like I said, I'm going to share the link to that forum. Very engaging. So the CRC members, who are they? They are actually supported by a team in the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs and a secretariat. It's a high-level committee with representation from a diverse cross-section of society. That's what it says in the terms of reference. And I quote, they were established to provide expert guidance to the government and the people of Jamaica during a phased constitutional process. This process is aimed at, among other things, implementing the recommendations of the 1995 Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform, on which consensus remains, while helping to build consensus where it has eroded or is non-existent on other relevant matters. Let me introduce you once again to the members of the Constitutional Reform Committee. The chairman, Marlene Malahoo Fort, KC, King's Counsel, is the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, and she is also the MP, Member of Parliament for the constituency of St James West Central. Next member, Ambassador Rocky Mead. He is co-chair. He serves in the office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for national strategic initiatives. Next member, Derek McCoy, KC, King's Counsel, and he is also Attorney General of Jamaica. Next member, Senator the Honourable Thomas Tavares Finson, KC, is President of the Senate and the Commissioner of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Next member, Senator Ransford Braham, KC. He's a government senator. Next member, Senator Donna Scott Motley. She is she sits in the Senate and she's part of the opposition. Mr. Anthony Hilton, MP. He is part of the parliamentary opposition. He serves as the Member of Parliament for Western St Andrew and is currently the Leader of the Opposition for Business in the House, as well as the Shadow Minister of Industry, Investment and Global Logistics. Next member, Mr. Hugh Small, KC. He's the Consultant Counsel and nominee of the Leader of the Parliamentary Opposition. Next member, the Honourable Lloyd Barnett. He is a national constitutional law expert. Next member, Dr. David Henry of the Wider Society, faith-based. Next member, Dr. Nadine Spence. She represents the civil society and is a social and political commentator. Next member, Mrs. Lalita Davis Mattis. She is she's a member of the National Council on Reparations. Next member, Mr. Sujay Boswell. He's an advisor on youth strategic engagement. Next member, Dr. Elaine McCarthy. She is the chairperson of the Jamaica Umbrella Groups of Churches. And final member, Professor Richard Albert, international constitutional law expert at the University of Texas in Austin. So, Mr. Albert, the appointment of Mr. Albert caused some contention with Christian groups, some Christian groups because of his same-sex views, and with members of the public because he is not Jamaican. Now, there's a June 21 article I read in the Jamaica Observer, and this article is incorrect because it states that Mr. Albert is Jamaican by descent. Even the Breda website say him Trini. Him Trini and Haitian. He is not Jamaican. So, Jamaica Observer, that June 21 article is not correct. Mr. Albert was born in Quebec to a Trinidadian father and a Haitian mother, and he is currently the only non-Jamaican serving on the country's Constitutional Reform Committee. So what is his role? According to the March 29 meeting minutes, the role of and I quote, the role of Professor Albert as the international constitutional law expert on the committee was to help to illuminate the questions being confronted in the reform process against the backdrop of the global experience, and to expose options for choosing what was best for charting Jamaica's own path forward in that process, consistent with the values and aspirations of the people of Jamaica. I'm going to repeat that sentence there. Consistent with the values and aspirations of the people of Jamaica. As a side note, Barbados, their Constitutional Reform Committee was made up of 11 persons. There was, so the chairman was a former High Court judge, an independent senator in Parliament, QC and chairman of the CARICOM Competition Commission, number 1. Person 2, the co-chair, who was a lawyer, lecturer at UWI, chairman at Arbitration Commission. Person 3, Secretary of Barbados Muslim Association, awarded the 3rd highest honour for strong commitment to seeing Barbados become a place of inclusivity and mutual respect, bridging social divides in underprivileged communities and the region. Person 4, King's Counsel, former Attorney General and MP. Person 5, Business Executive and Accountant. Person 6, Chairperson of National Youth Policy Committee. Attorney specialising in international trade, regional integration and development. Person 7, a senator working with disability rights, disaster risk reduction and education. Person 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Person 6, law student. Person 7, ordained minister and independent senator. Next person, 40-year graduate teacher. And the final person was a professor of constitutional governance and politics at UWI, who was actually part of St. Lucia's CRC. You notice something, come you notice something. Light sprinkling of politicians. Okay, we'll move on. So, public engagement. This is also encompassed in this aspect of the report that we're reviewing, right? I'm going to highlight some of the public engagements referenced in the report. So, there were 38 minutes that the CRC held, 38 meetings the CRC held. 36 minutes are available, right? The town hall meetings, there were technically 6, right? There was one in Montego Bay, April 26th, 2023. All of these were in 2023, right? So Mobay, April 26th. Mandeville, May 17. Port Antonio, June 28. We did that, you know. Santa Cruz, July 26. Savannah Lamar, July 27, and the sixth one was actually at the UK High Commission in London. That was October 14. So technically there were only 5 parishes where town hall meetings took place. So there was nothing in Hanover, Trelawney, Clarendon, St Anne, St Catherine, St Mary, Kingston, St Andrew, or St Thomas. Okay, public engagement continued. So that's an issue that obviously, So there was also the Road to Republic tour. Now this was where the CRC went and met with 5th and 6th form students at various high schools. They went to Cedar Grove Academy in Portmore. They went to Waterford High in Portmore. They went to Jose Marti High in Spanish Town and Cumberland High in Portmore. Right. There are 180 high schools in Jamaica. There was also a very good forum that took place while we're on the subject of high schools. I guess you could class this with, talking to high schools. It was called an Annual Heritage Month Lecture, Road to Republic, and it was hosted by Lalita Mattis Davis and Sujay Boswell of the CRC. And it was held at the Institute of Jamaica, right? And this forum was involved Knox College, Calabar High, Salvation Army, and Alphonsus Davis High. And I must say, I watched that forum and it was very engaging. It was very good. Again, there's 180 high schools in Jamaica, so much more engaging to do in that respect. But I must give credit to that Annual Heritage Month lecture. Lalita Davis, she held that down. She did it again. It was a great forum. Public engagement continuing. UWI, University of West Indies. There were a number of engagements that took place involving UWI, right? On September 18, 2022, there was an online town hall meeting called Constitutional Reform and the Public, the Roles, Functions and Legitimacy of Political Opposition. There was another forum on November 13, 2022, called Constitutional Reform, Enhancing Transparency and Accountability. There was a next one on March 2, 2023, which was actually moderated by Professor Cynthia Barrow-Giles. She sat on the Barbados Constitutional Reform Committee. She is also a well-known author. We have one of her book. And that online town hall meeting was called Constitutional Reform in the Commonwealth Caribbean, Some Insights, Compromises and Possibilities. She wrote a great book actually. It's called Introduction to Caribbean Politics. There was a next forum. Actually, it was entitled Constitutional Reform in the Caribbean, a review of the Cujo draft 5th Mona Law public debate. Now, this involved a debate on a draft of the Constitution that was it was drafted by a gentleman called Haile Mikhail Cujo. He is a part of We the People Republic Jamaica. He's a former independent parliamentary candidate in Westmoreland, and there's an interview that he did with Dion Jackson Miller on April 26, where he talks more about his draft constitution. Now, Mr. Cudjoe also attends a lot of the town hall meetings and talks about the draft there as well. But, in this specific interview, he confirms that the draft is a totally new constitution, a revolution, right, based on the Bible, the Ethiopian Constitution, and the United Nations Constitution. He advocates that the Prime Minister should also be the head of state, no presidential rubber stamping, and that the Deputy Prime Minister and the Prime Minister should be both directly elected by citizens. Right? He also advocates for a petition for their removal, so that they could be held accountable and to prevent tyranny. And he also goes on to advocate for a fixed nomination day, fixed elections in February every 4 years. He proposed only having 10 government ministries, which he believes would cut down on expense and overlap. He is in support of the CCJ as the final court of appeal. And again, I will post a link to his draft and the amendment to his, I believe it's the 15th Amendment to his document on the page of this podcast. More UWI debates. There was a great constitution debate between UWI and UTEC called The President in the Jamaican Republic. That was May 15, 2023. And then our Jamaican Republic youth debate, King Charles III, Change or Continuity for Jamaica. That was another debate that took place on November 10, 2023. So what else could be done? Nadine Spence at the Mandeville Town Hall, she was saying that, the committee is relying on, leaders in the church, local councillors, who have access to more remote areas, and political parties really facilitating discussion on this whole issue, right? Also justices of the peace, Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, these are areas where the conversation can be expanded. From a youth point of view, in the Mandeville Town Hall, Sir J. Boswell was stating that part of the youth engagement strategy was to get high schools engaged. The National Secondary Students Council, Jamaica Prefects Association, the National Youth Council, and National Police Youth Clubs, which could, get more into community spaces. That would help involve the youth. So, public engagement. Town halls need to be in every parish. It doesn't take every member of the panel of the CRC to be on a panel, right? There's 15 of them and there's 14 parishes. They could spread out. They could have others on the panel with them, like, the MP, mayors, school principals, teachers, police, local doctors, pastors, prefects, etc. This involvement will help let the discussion spread out in the community, right? which is very important because you want to hear what people have to say, right? And it is very important to hear what people have to say because in more than one of those town hall meetings, beach rights have been put forward as a concern for the public. And the response was, it's going to be dealt with in phase 2. But here's the issue. If it's not going to be dealt with in phase 1, identify precisely how it's going to go in phase 2. Right? With regards to Beach Act, there is actually litigation in progress over the beach access rights of Jamaicans. Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement has 2 active cases right now, right? The access for locals to the Blue Lagoon in Portland and Bob Marley Beach in St. Thomas. So it's an issue. So, all right, let's move along and look at the major issue where have Jamaica, the Porsche, park up with bus tire. Right? Jamaica's final court of appeal. So, the Gleaner. Going back to November 17, 2022, Ms. Malahoo Fort states that not all of the matters that people have interest in will be dealt with in the first phase. I can say up front now, and as of now, there is no consensus on the final court at this time. Right? The opposition leader says that he wanted to see the executive and judicial branches of the government decolonized together and urged the government to deal with the burning issue of decolonizing access to justice. Now, speaking of access to justice, in the Montego Bay Town Hall, Anthony Hilton spoke about a Trinidad and Tobago businessman, right? Now, you don't need a visa to go from Trinidad to Britain. And even that deterred him from pursuing a case with the Privy Council in London, because what he was basically saying is when you factor in his time and the costs of travelling to London, it's prohibitive. But then when you look at the Shanique Myrie case, right? Shanique Myrie versus the state of Barbados, that case was heard in the Caribbean Court of Justice. And the CCJ did actually sit in Kingston, Jamaica. They also heard the case via video link, and they also sat in Barbados and Trinidad. So the accessibility to justice is a real issue. And just to verify, the Privy Council has never sat in Jamaica. Side note, there is actually a Jamaican judge who sits on the CCJ. His name is Justice Winston Charles Anderson. He was born in St. Anne, and he's the youngest judge who's been appointed to the CCJ, and he's been there since 2010. So, roadblock. There is an article in the Gleaner, May 19, 2024, where A.J. Nicholson mentions sources that point to Trinidad and Tobago, which 47 years after they became a republic, they still have the Privy Council as their apex court, even though the Caribbean Court of Justice, their headquarters is in Trinidad. So I guess you can see where the anxiousness about let's deal with it now is coming from. I'm also going to refer to an article, Radio Jamaica News on May 23, 2024, just to show you the consensus on this whole CCJ issue. The director of the National Integrity Action, Danielle Archer, I'm going to quote her. She said, "It is ethically unsound to remove the king and still expect the Privy Council, appointed by the king, to dictate the application and interpretation of Jamaican law." And then, of course, we got to go back to PJ and the article, "Lockdown and Don't Move Until You Get Agreement." That was a June 7 article in the Jamaica Gleaner where Mr. Patterson says, "It's one Jamaica. We show we are capable of greatness. I am not suggesting that political contests cease and rivalry and debate discontinue. What I am saying is there are some issues that are compelling. We are destroying ourselves," he declared. Boy, Marcus. Look, like we're going to bounce with this quote once again. And I quote the right excellent Marcus Garvey. "You at this time can only be destroyed by yourselves from within and not from without. You have reached the point where the victory is to be won from within and can only be lost from within." I hope you're continuing to enjoy this journey, that you're finding it educational, useful and in, and look forward to our continued travels on the road to becoming a republic truly independent and sovereign together. Yes, the tire flat, but it's one Jamaica and we are capable of greatness. And somebody I go fix that tire still. You can find this podcast on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Podcast Index, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Apple, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. And of course, if you are reasonable about anything, you can find, or if you can't find any of the YouTube links either, you can email me on atasteofja@outlook.com. So until next time, I thank you for supporting this podcast. Please share it with friends and family. And again, I thank you for taking the time to listen. One love.